Whatever you.
Or just do one. I mean,
Well, one of these is not. Okay. I put them on the other table.
yeah, please.
Yep. Sure. Here, you know what let's do, Roberto? Go ahead, do whatever now. That way you can. See, that's for, I need that for the microphone. Yeah, I guess that's not working. I don't know what I did with my running sheets. They're just all things out. Did you change the line to mic? Is it on the mic? Is that it's on mic? Yeah. Out. Yeah. Check. I'm gonna.
I did it already.
Yeah.
Just plug it in now.
Oh, okay, that's fine. It might. I'm gonna just check. Do I have it? Or do I have it? I just told you, man.
Shabbat in song on page 10 as we take this time to transition into our sanctuary, our holy space this evening, the holy time of Shabbat as we leave our week behind. We sing these words, Yedid Nefesh, beloved soul, our heart's delight, kind of a reminder that we are taught that we get an extra soul on Shabbat. Again, page 10, and we'll join together. Together this evening to welcome in Shabbat in our beautiful outdoor setting. Again, masks are optional. Please outside, so do what is comfortable for you. And just a little health and safety. As you can see, our building is open. If you need restrooms, water, anything otherwise, it's good to breathe in the fresh air and slow down and recognize the wonders of creation, which on Shabbat we get to do as we pause and stop creating. Special welcome to our guest speaker this evening, Ruth Zacharin, Director of the Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. We could not have had a more timely invitation for you, and we're so glad you're here with us. And we'll look forward to learning with Ruth a little later in our service. Also, with gratitude to our Temple Social Action Committee for making this evening possible. We're going to honor Nancy Gottlieb with blessing our Shabbat candles as we bring in the light of Shabbat on pages 2 and 3.
We might pretend.
We sometimes use our imagination.
Is it not?
It's not even lighting. Oh, there you go. Look at that. The first miracle of tonight.
So it's a Hanukkah miracle.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who've kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel
And Shabbat Shalom to those joining us from home as well. We'll continue on page 20 with Lachado D. So we welcome in the Shabbat bride. We'll join in verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. On the last verse, if you're able, we'll rise and face outward to our trees to bring in Shabbat. Turn to page 26 for Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkada v'yitkada shemei rava ve'alma divrach yirutei v'yamich malchutei v'chayechonu yom echad u'chayetecho beit Yisrael Troma v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shalei tekusha brichu, leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushmechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma, ve'yimeru. Join together in our prayer for creation on page 31. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'ma'ariv Aravi. Continue on page 32. Everlasting love, you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malachuto Leolam Vaed. Be seated. Continue on page 36. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levacha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol yodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ela asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'vlechtecha b'derech u'shochbecha u'vkumecha u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu totafot b'einecha u'ktabtam amizizot beitecha ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen. On the top of page 39, we each week and each day recall our people's story, our journey from slavery to freedom, joined together, standing on the parted shores of history. We still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. Page 40. Page 42, we pray together our prayer for safety and shelter, Hashkivenu, as we ask that God's shelter of peace is spread over us and all people. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu Leshalom, B'Hodeinu Shomrei. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people, Israel, and over Jerusalem. Continue on page 44 as we celebrate our weekly gift of Shabbat with Vishamru. Amen. tefillah, our central prayer for our service. Adonai, Sefratai Tiftach, Ufi Agitehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei HaKol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'mevii Gilva livnei Bethlehem, L'ma'al Shemo be'ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Ma'il Avraham ve'Ezra Sarah, Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh hakol atah Rav le'Hoshia, Mori atah, Mechalkel chayim le'chesed, Mechayeh hakol be'rachamim rabim, Somech noflim ve'rofech olim, Umatir asurim, Umechayen emunato, Mishenei afar, Michamocha b'gevurot, Umigomelach, Melech memit umechayen, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah l'chayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, U'kdoshim b'chol yom ya'alelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, El HaKadosh. Blessed are you, Adonai, the Holy God. We'll take a few moments to add our own prayers from the heart, and please feel free to be seated when you're ready. God of life and maker of all creation, every act of violence in our world, in our communities, and in our homes destroys a part of your creation. Stir in our hearts a renewed sense of reverence for all life. Give us the vision, the wisdom, and the courage to create a community of safety for our children. Guide us in your ways so that we may break the cycle of violence. This we believe, that peace, love, and healing begin with us. Join on page 62 as we ask the one who makes peace above, bring peace here amongst all of us. To health and healing on page 253 as we prepare for Misha Berach. We especially pray for these members of our community and families who are ill at this time. Colin Monroe, Imbar Bat Aviva, Maddie Bat Linda Walter, Guy Ben Rita, David Ben Marcel, Mary Lou Holt, Janet Watson, Elizabeth Hill, Enrico Mascaro, Deborah Booker, Ori Bachila, Ari Bentaya, Annette Zerachian, Esther, daughter of Sol, Rachel Michaela Patrivka, Robert Bloom, Benjamin Horowitz, Bradley Dichter, Mateo Goldman, Toby Weiner, Esther Rushovskaya, Amy Fasberg-Kurz, Eileen Arnone, Jean Sands, Roseanne Cohen, Tom Fiorino, Barry Levine, Carolyn Weil, Stephen Driscoll, Richard Slifka, Marshall Lukoff, Anna, Jerry Spingarn, Caroline Spingarn, Sue Goldberg, Mark Albion. If there are other names that you'd like to mention, you may do so.
We have a wonderful and active social action committee at Temple Beth David, and one of the things that the social action committee has done under the guidance of our our chair, Jeff Greenwald, is to engage members on what they're passionate about when it comes to social justice. So this really grows out of that initiative to engage members on a grassroots level and then to bring issues to the congregation. So I want to invite up Marsha Hirschberg, who was really instrumental in inviting our speaker here. She'll introduce our speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom, Marsha.
There are other members in our group. You already met Nancy Gottlieb, but also Michael Hanau and Bill Salas. And tonight, Bill Salas has prepared a sign-up sheet for any of you who want additional information after you hear our speaker. And thirdly, we ask that you save all your questions, maybe you should write them down, for Ruth till after the service when we're enjoying our owning. I'd like to introduce Ruth Zachrin, who is the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Coalition for Gun Violence. This organization contains over 90 organizations, institutions, and many, if you'll check their website, are Jewish congregations. So I would like you to welcome Ruth, who has over 20 years experience in teaching and learning about violence. And please, hopefully after she speaks, we'll all be a little bit smarter in what we know about this issue. Thank you very much.
This is typically how my speeches always start, is adjusting the microphone to my height. So
Good.
I'm very used to it, thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Are you all able to hear me? Yes. All right, terrific. It is really lovely to be with all of you this Shabbat. As a member of the Jewish community, it is particularly meaningful for me to be able to have these conversations in my Jewish community. So I am really appreciative of the opportunity to be with all of you this evening. It's interesting to actually note that when the coalition started almost 10 years ago in the immediate aftermath of the shooting at Sandy Hook, it came together because a group of faith communities, as well as some community-based organizations like the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, came together to say, we want to do some work here in Massachusetts to prevent what happened at Sandy Hook from ever happening here. And so the coalition was truly born from faith leaders and faith communities coming together to demand peace and justice in our communities. So it feels very meaningful at this point in time to be connecting with other faith communities to talk about the issue of gun violence and gun violence prevention. It also feels very meaningful to be with all of you this evening because, unfortunately, the news has been filled with incidents of gun violence and mass shootings that have been happening around the country. And just to ground us in what that has been looking like in 2022, the Gun Violence Archive, which is my go-to source of information about incidents of gun violence in the United States, has documented 254 mass shootings in communities across the United States in the year 2022. So that is more incidents of mass shootings than there are days in the year. To be clear about how we're defining that, the Gun Violence Archive defines a mass shooting as any incident where 4 or more people are shot within that same incident. No matter how many fatalities, if 4 or more people are shot, that's what's defined as a mass shooting. And sadly, all you have to do is open the newspaper or listen to the news to know that that has been happening all over our country at very alarming rates over the past several months. And I want to talk a little bit about why we're at this moment in time and why we are seeing this. But before I get there, I want to talk a little bit about how we think about the issue of gun violence and the work of the coalition, and then I'll bring us back to this moment in time. And then I'll finish with what we can do, because whenever we talk about this issue, we don't want to just hold the heavy stuff. We also want to acknowledge that gun violence is preventable and there are actions we can all take to make a difference and keep folks in our communities safer. So a little bit about how we think about the issue of gun violence. Gun violence is actually many different things. It is mass shootings, it is domestic violence, homicides, it is unintentional shootings, which means that somebody leaves a gun loaded and unsecured, and often a child picks it up and someone gets hurt. It's homicides that happen in community, it's police shootings, and it is also actually the largest number of deaths from gun violence or firearm suicide. Here in Massachusetts, close to 2/3 of deaths from guns are actually firearm suicides, and that's something that doesn't always get highlighted when we talk about the issue of gun violence. And I wanted to start with that because it's important to understand that gun violence is many different issues that are interrelated, but actually require different kinds of solutions and interventions. So when we think about the issue of gun violence at the Coalition, the way that we define it is that gun violence is a public health issue, largely driven by racial and economic disparity that impacts communities in many different ways and requires a holistic response in order to make the narrative of guns in our communities different. And when I say a holistic response, the way that we think about that is that it's important to address access to guns and the proliferation of guns into our communities, but to also really dig deep into root causes of violence. And that when we do both sides of that work, look at access to guns as well as the root causes of gun violence, we believe that we can move the needle on gun violence and make substantial and lasting change. So how do we do that? The Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence has divided our work into 4 main pillars of how we approach this issue. The first being advocacy. And when these faith leaders got together almost 10 years ago, the work was really focused on going to the State House and talking to our leaders and legislators and decision makers about laws that could keep us safer. And the Coalition was very involved in helping to pass the 2014 Comprehensive Gun Reform Bill, and then in 2018, the Extreme Risk Protection Order Bill. And since then, we continue to do a lot of advocacy at the State House, but our advocacy takes on multiple levels. We are addressing the guns themselves. We have a bill right now that we are trying to get passed before the end of this legislative session called the Crime Gun Data Analysis Bill, which would compel the state to do a better and more thorough job of analyzing data collected from guns in the aftermath of shootings to better understand where those guns are coming from. And in addition to that bill, we have a number of bills that are focused on trauma, the intersection of trauma and gun violence. One of those being something called the ACEs bill, Alternative Community Response, which would move mental health crisis calls away from law enforcement response into clinicians and advocates, understanding that the majority of police shootings happen in the context of a mental health crisis call. And then we have a variety of bills that really look at juvenile justice reform, because we know that if we want to prevent gun violence, we must make sure that youth, and all youth, have what they need to be safe and well in the world. And we have a variety of bills focused on that. In addition to that advocacy, we do a lot of budget advocacy to make sure that our member organizations, the programs that are doing the work of violence disruption and prevention, are as robustly funded as possible. And a big part of our work in this past year was successfully advocating for an allocation of American Rescue Plan funds for violence prevention, re-entry services, and youth jobs. And at the end of that process, we were able to get the state of Massachusetts to commit $50 million of ARPA funds towards those initiatives. In addition to our advocacy work, we do a lot of public education and awareness, small gatherings like this or larger events where we're bringing folks together to have conversations about root causes of violence, the nuances of gun violence prevention. And one of the initiatives that we are very involved with right now is partnering with the folks who made the documentary This Ain't Normal, which is about youth and guns. We've been holding a variety of screenings with panel discussions that really dig deep into why young people carry guns and the impact of violence on our youth and what solutions can look like so we can make that different. In addition to our education, we also do a great deal of coalition building. Our coalition is actually now 120 member organizations from across the Commonwealth. We have been growing at a rapid pace. And our goal is really to build power by speaking with a unified voice about what needs to change in our world in order to prevent violence from happening. One of the ways that we do that is we have a leadership team that's very representative of our member organizations that gives us direction and consultation and leadership on everything from how we talk about issues of gun violence, to our advocacy initiatives, to what our public education and awareness looks like. And our last initiative is really focused on community organizing, particularly with young people. And we have a full-time community organizer who's working deeply in communities most impacted by gun violence. She's actually doing a lot of work with young people to teach advocacy skills and have them get involved in the work of speaking with legislators and decision makers around what they think is necessary for their communities to be more peaceful. And we believe that through that multi-pronged approach of advocacy, education, public awareness, coalition building, and community organizing, that we can make a difference around gun violence in the Commonwealth. Most of our work is focused on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We do get involved to a limited extent in some of the federal work, but most of our work is really focused on making sure our communities here in Massachusetts are safer. So I want to segue into talking about where we are in this moment in time, because I imagine so many of you sitting here have been very concerned about what we've been hearing on the news, and every weekend, every day, there's more news about mass shootings happening around the country. And of course, at the top of everyone's minds are recent mass shootings in Buffalo, when a white supremacist killed black people at a grocery store, and then Uvalde, when we lost children to gun violence. There's so much that's going on that has really led us to this moment. There's issues of white supremacy, as we talked about before. We're seeing an increased number of young men in particular accessing semi-automatic weapons with catastrophic results. But some context setting is that the past 2 years, particularly when the pandemic started, there was a sharp uptick in sales of guns and ammunition. We are now at a point in this country where we have more guns than we do people. We have 400 million guns in civilian circulation. And so this really creates a very drastic situation for us with so many guns in circulation. Every country on the planet has folks with mental health issues, has conflict, has hate, has all of the issues that we have here in the United States. But because we in the United States have such a proliferation of guns, all of those issues can become much more lethal much more quickly. And with that sharp uptick in gun sales over the past couple of years, that leaves us feeling very concerned about what that means for us. So I think that's just a little bit about some of the things that have been happening in this country more recently that have created a situation where we're seeing these mass shootings happen so frequently. There's a great deal to say around what solutions look like. Folks are probably very aware of the conversation that's happening on a federal level and the change that we're trying to make around some of our laws, whether it is banning assault weapons or what have you. And that's a really complicated conversation. And unfortunately, we have a lot of work to do to make change on a federal level. But as we're thinking about that, one thing that I want to say is that if we don't get change on a federal level, it means that what we do in every state means a great deal. So what we do here in Massachusetts means a lot. And we will continue to work to make sure that we are passing laws and that we are investing in communities and investing in community-based solutions that will promote peace as well as prevent violence from happening at all. Ultimately, and this is the way that I ground myself in this conversation, there can be a lot of discussion about what the Second Amendment or what solutions look like or how do we get to a different place. But for me, ultimately, this is about the work of safety. It's about the work of promoting peace. It's about the work of making sure that everyone can walk through the world without fearing gun violence. And the way that I really ground myself is that I want to create a world where children feel safe at school, where children feel safe walking home from school, and where children feel safe playing outside after school. This is the world that I want to work towards. And I think there are ways that we can get there and to make the current narrative around gun violence different. And I'm just thrilled to be with all of you this evening to have this conversation, to engage you in this process of trying to make change. And we can make change. There are things that we can do to make our community safer and to keep our children safer. If folks are interested in learning more about some of the bills that we have at the coalition that we are really promoting, I'm going to be leaving some information here where you can go on our website and learn more about legislative advocacy and what that looks like. We actually just sent out an action alert yesterday to have folks help us get the crime gun data analysis bill that I mentioned before passed. This is a bill that our member organizations have been really focused on because it's about understanding how guns are landing in communities, whether it's Mattapan or Roxbury or Dorchester or Brockton or Springfield. We know there are too many guns in communities, and in order to make good policy to help us understand how to decrease the flow of guns, we need to understand the narrative of how the guns are getting there to begin with. So this is a bill that we are really focused on. Another solution is sustained investment in the programs that are doing work of violence prevention and disruption. We continue to do a lot of budget advocacy at the state level as well as the municipal level to make sure that we are making those investments in community-based solutions. And another action step that you can take is, and this is something that I talk about a lot, when those of us who believe in a child's right to be safe get louder than those who are going to push the narrative that everyone should have the right to unfettered access to guns, we will make change. And one way that you can get loud is tomorrow, if it's within your Shabbat practice, there will be a March for Our Lives action at Columbus Park in the North End, which is an opportunity for all of us to come together in community and demand change. If you'd like more information about that action, I have it all living in my head, so I can give it to you. One of the organizers of that action actually lives in my house, so I've had pretty easy access to her, and the coalition has been supporting the organization of this action. And I do think that those opportunities for folks to come together and learning in community, to agitate for change, to demand something different, that those are powerful moments. And if you're able to participate, I would really encourage you to do so. At the ONEG, there's going to be information about some statistics when it comes to gun violence in Massachusetts and what that means here, the work of the coalition, and how to be in touch with us. There's a way to sign up for our newsletter and our action alerts if you would like to be getting updates from us on a regular basis. And this is an ongoing conversation. I hope to be in regular contact with you to talk more about what can happen here individually here in this community to support the work of preventing gun violence. And I just want to thank you for having me here and to spend Shabbat with you. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Thank you, Bill and Marcia, and all those involved in the Social Action Committee who were focused on bringing Ruth to us and inspiring us. Just some logistics in addition. So there are flyers on the ONEG table. There's no ONEG cookies yet, but there will be on that table as well. Given the space, and Bill and Marcia, you can say, no, Rabbi, that's not right. Don't do that if it's not. But my suggestion would be those, so that Ruth is not mobbed by a minion of questioners, that those who want to ask some questions, you've got 5 minutes to get cookies and come back to this area because it's an open space, and maybe some of you have the same questions, and that might be a more orderly way to do it. And for those who want to schmooze and look at the handouts, you can do that too. Is that kosher? Yeah? Because otherwise we're in the street. Is that okay? Okay, so 5 minutes. So those who are interested, is that okay with you? also Ruth, and that way we don't want Ruth to work too hard because she's also observing Shabbat and kind of working. So we're going to draw that balance in kind of an orderly way here. Okay, very good.
And is it okay if we send the handout to anyone who might be watching on live stream as well? Great, so we can, because we have it in print here, but we can send that out as well. And again,
Do we want to leave the live stream going too, if there's questions or no?
it's up to Tim.
It's up to you, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's a good idea if anyone joins Al Chakam L'Chama.
And again, thank you to other initiatives going on as well through the What Do I Care About campaign. Lots of ways to get involved. Thank you. Yes, Marcia?
I forgot to say, anybody can join us if they'd like to.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Not an exclusive headroom.
And on a related topic, thank you to those who were serving as our security greeters tonight as well, Nancy Gottlieb and Steve Brody. And we are looking for more and more volunteers, especially as the summer goes on, to help greet and kind of be an extra set of eyes. And if you're interested, for now, if you don't mind, Howie, I'm just gonna Howie's here and can get you hooked up. We've got some guidelines on what to do in terms of ushering and helping out. So especially if you're around this summer, we would love your assistance. Thank you, Tim, on our live stream. And tomorrow morning, you're welcome to join our lay-led minyan for Shabbat morning at 9 a.m., both in person in the library and on Zoom, as well as Tot Shabbat, if you'd like to join me and Micah.
If you know any tots, you
Yes.
can bring them.
Or Young Elementary School. Yes, that's 9:30 a.m. outdoors, out back, right next to the playground. We're going to pray first and then play. So it's really open for all ages. Anyone who would like to pray and play, that's Tot
I told you
Shabbat
we got
tomorrow.
to play first before.
No, we're praying first.
Okay.
All right, and snacks. For everything else, please look at your weekly shofar email. It is all in there. And
Let's take it to Alinu.
yes,
Yeah.
I think so. We're going to move into
Yeah.
our concluding prayers. Page
It's on us.
282, Alenu. It is on us to fix the world. If you're able, please rise.
Alinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, l'tegila yotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigoye ha'aratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. And we remain standing as we take this moment to remember loved ones who are no longer with us. We are especially remembering these loved ones who passed away in recent weeks. Philip Ritzenberg, father of Jeremy Ritzenberg, Hazel Henderson, friend of Mark Albion, and Annalie Stone, aunt of Bonnie Wellens. And we remember these loved ones whose yahrzeit, whose anniversary of death occurred this week. Joyce Cohen, Nathan Davis, Lawrence Deems Egbert, Avraham Deutsch, Hyman Foreman, Ruth Gaudette, Lucille Holliner, Theodore Kinkrowitz, Erwin Lewis, James Pastor, Edna Pelzer, Cynthia Pincus Russell, Richard Preisler, Sonia Richmond, Samuel Schur, Henry Triber, Eli and Estelle Tuckman, and Rose Zub. If there are other names you are remembering, please share them with us.
turn to page 294 for Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah, v'yamad yivrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'yomechon u'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam ulamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'miran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'romav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. And a special welcome as well to a few members we haven't seen in a while, those back from college, and some guests as well. If you're here for your first time at Temple Beth David, welcome.
So we conclude our service, and before Kiddush and Motzi, we end with a prayer that expresses really what Ruth has brought to us tonight, the idea that we need to build this love from this world from love and compassion. So repeat after me: Olam, Chesed, Yibaneh, which means this world needs to be built from compassion. It goes like this. Olam chesed yibaneh, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. Olam chesed yibaneh, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. Olam chesed yibaneh. I will build this world from love. I will build this world from love. You must build this world from love. You must build this world from love. And if we build this world, build this world from love. Then God will build this world. Then God will build this world from love. Olam chesed yibaneh. Kiddush and Motzi on page 5.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu. V'shabbat kodsho ve'avahu v'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron le'maseh v'reishit, hihu yom techila le'mikra'i kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim, kivanu v'acharta v'otanu kidashta mikol hamim, v'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava uvratzon imchaltanu 7:45, and we've had so many B'nai Mitzvahs. It's like the first time we didn't get in a while.
You remember it really well.
But come back next week, we've got one more.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam,
Amosi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
It is exactly 7:35 according to my watch. At 7:40, if you're interested in questions, come on back here. Watch your step for the cord because we'll leave the mic up, and you're also, it's open. Schmooze or discuss. 4 minutes and 45 seconds.
Fair enough.
Hey, Wendy. Well, do you see the stage?
Yeah.
That's a bit of a deal. I think we need to invest in new music.
The anniversary of the
Yeah.
you can still do it.
I know. I would like to. We've had some.
You want to be the first Miss Hollow class? Come drop it. We're like little hollow.
It is. Yes. Yeah. And it's still the year.
Ben?
This coming year is my 20th year.
So you got mine. I got mine, miss. I got two of those.
Yeah, so I was thinking of actually buying that. I sort of did a 10-year reflection. Like, yeah. Now, I can do a reflection on 20 years.
Well, special, so it's the same as the general case of women and children, or not, or retrograde, female clergy,
In general or individual?
Look at, because it's people are part of it, close it on the ground, which is perfectly organic. So you would think that
By the way, here's the catch, right? Because all female rabbis are in the legal denominations, right? Or not considered, right? So because the Westminster does not pertain with it. So that kind of answers your question there because most Jews. Well, it depends on the denomination. It depends on the denomination, but well, that too, yes. Yeah.
But, all the different denominations.
Yeah. Well, hopefully. I'm hesitant to do something over the summer because it's not here. But yes.
That'd be a good thing to do.
Yes.
Okay. I'll take notes.
Might need to get sisterhood.
Yeah.
I'll talk to Betty.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. This was a good service.
Thank you. Always good to hear you singing.
Yeah, you know what? So if the live stream's on, this is gonna pick you up.
Okay.
I don't know. I think probably.
Do we know if there's
Do
still
we have
folks
one
watching?
still? I think. We don't know, but
Oh.
but this will be fine.
Okay.
Let's have this here just in case someone says I can't.
Sure.
Here.
Okay, if I put my drink here.
You can put it wherever you can grab a chair if you prefer.
It's either way. I don't know how you usually do this.
We usually don't do it outside, so.
So we're making
there
this up
is
as
no
we go
usual-
along.
Yeah.
Right, I love it. I love it. Thankfully I'm not particularly tall, so even if I stand, that's probably not that intimidating. I actually prefer to work without slides, only because I actually find slides more distracting. And of course, with doing virtual presentations, if you have slides up, you can't see people on your screen. And that I find actually harder. So it's just easier for me if I do it this way. It also means I sometimes forget to mention things, so I do forget to mention something.
I was interested in what you said about. I was actually surprised. I thought you were going to go in a different direction when you said if things don't happen at a different level, that it's limited what we can do at a state level. So I'm curious about more of that. Like, how much does a state like Massachusetts or even California make a difference?
So it's a little bit, it's kind of yes and with that, because obviously what we do here in Massachusetts makes a difference. We have close to the lowest rate of gun violence in the country because we have strong gun laws, because we have been investing in programs that are doing work violence disruption, and then we're also limited by what is happening in our surrounding states. So we think that about 50% of the guns that are used to commit shootings in Massachusetts are coming from other states, with New Hampshire being the highest. So New Hampshire, their weak gun laws make us less safe. So what we do here matters, and there are limitations based on what's happening regionally and in the country. So it's actually all of those things are true, but we still need, especially in absence of federal action, to push here in Massachusetts to keep things going in the right direction. Something I didn't get into because there wasn't enough time to get into the nuances of this is there's a Supreme Court case that we may hear the results of on Monday that could really impact how our laws work in Massachusetts. It's a case that came out of New York, and so if that goes sideways, we're going to have to do some work in Massachusetts to create some provisions that will prevent our current registration and access to guns and all of those systems that we have in place from being dismantled. So that could get a little bit tricky for us. So it's both of those things, actually. And do we want to just have folks jump in with any questions? How do you want to facilitate this?
Yeah, I mean, if folks want to jump in that, yeah, that sounds good.
So we do a lot of legislative advocacy, but it is only one part of what we do. I would say our organizing, outreach, and education is, over the past 3 years that I've been the executive director, has become an increasingly larger part of our work. We have a 2-year legislative session in Massachusetts. It's pretty much the longest in the country. So if all we did was legislative advocacy and we only had the chance of passing laws every 2 years, I'm going to suggest it's just not enough. And then the other piece for me is, one of the things that we heard from our member orgs was laws are important, but they don't necessarily get at the kind of violence that we see in communities every day. So it has to be, in my mind, a multi-pronged process of trying to prevent violence.
That connects to my question about the connection with public health.
Yeah.
Like, is there a way, even through funding structure, to actually embed it into the public health structure?
Yeah, I think a few things to say about that. Public health is very much driven by research, and truly, you can't address an issue you don't understand. And in the United States, we've had a pretty much full stop on any research related to gun violence for about 25 years. And it's only been in the past year that the CDC is starting to do this research again. We are way behind when it comes to really quantifying and defining gun violence from a public health perspective. We're a little farther along in Massachusetts because we have institutions that have been doing that research locally, but we really need to have the CDC and sustained investment in research if we're going to embed gun violence prevention in our public health model. But I believe that that is what needs to happen.
And the director of the CDC is a fellow member of the Jewish community in Massachusetts.
Yeah, you know, for kids. Yes, we're going to do a little Jewish geography here for a minute. Just bear with us. Yeah.
Got it. And then there's
Thank you. Please. Yep. Can you speak up a little bit? Mm-hmm. Yep.
The only thing that I have a problem with, maybe because my stuff is not English, is using the term gun violence.
Okay.
And I know that it comes up in politics, so it's not the guns that are. I agree. My son has 2 guns. They're very peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
They lie peacefully. So I wonder why we're not using violence. Guns involved in, you know what I'm saying? Something like that. Do not connect the gun to the violence.
Mm-hmm.
The gun is just a tool to be violent. If you want to have guns, come from the Middle East, you would just. It's not that easy to go into school and do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so thank you for bringing that up, actually, because I think it's an important conversation. And we have a lot of discussions about language and terminology because language matters. So I appreciate that you brought that up. So for anyone on live stream, the question was about, the choice of the term gun violence and some of the unpacking that we need to do around what that actually means. And part of the reason why we talk specifically about gun violence is because any kind of violence becomes inherently more lethal when you have a weapon that can kill people very easily. So, I did 25 years of work with survivors of domestic and sexual violence prior to coming to the coalition. And one of the things that we talked, so the majority of domestic violence homicides are perpetrated with a gun. Domestic violence looks very different when someone doesn't have access to a gun, because the use of a gun to perpetrate violence can be very impulsive and very lethal. Not to get too gory, but other forms of violence, whether it's strangulation or stabbing, it's a much more intimate kind of violence. And you also can't kill multiple people at once that way. So we do parse that out a little bit because violence perpetrated with guns does look different than violence that's perpetrated with other either weapons or other means. So I appreciate that because language is important, but there are reasons why we have sort of connected and put together the term gun violence as a way to describe this. It's just a little, frankly, it's just a little more clunky.
It's just a little more change.
Yeah.
Might change the way, first of all, it will take off conversation. Guns are not violent.
Yep.
To me, English is not my major. It makes sense. Again, I'm from Israel. In Israel, many guns out there.
Yep.
There's registration that most of the guns are counted for.
Right, right.
And there's not that much violence using guns among Jews.
Right. So there's
a huge amount of violence using firearms, explosives, among the Arab Israel, Arab
Yeah, so, and if I can just interject, because I think there's a whole conversation we don't have time for today around gun culture in the United States, which is its own issue. Lots to unpack around that, as well as the accessibility of semi-automatic weapons from folks who are not trained to use them. Because most states, Massachusetts does have a training requirement, but most states do not. During the pandemic, we saw not just a very high uptick in gun sales, we also saw a high uptick in gun sales for folks who had never owned a gun before. And if you live in a state where there's no training, it means that you have guns in the hands of 18-year-old boys, as we have seen recently, or folks who don't know how to use them, that is inherently even more unsafe. So I think it's the United States has a unique set of dynamics when it comes to access to guns and gun culture that I think really impact this conversation. But I wanted to invite some other voices and if other folks have questions. Please.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Delightful. I think I've heard you speak once before, and I feel like it was a good talk.
Come back again, maybe I'll do something different the next time.
So, back when I was on social media, before I became in foreign,
Mm-hmm.
I like to engage folks who are on the other side of the political spectrum. For me, in particular, a right-wing cousin who's military. And when I saw him post rejoinder to my progressive friends, a lot of his comments had to do with the apparent ignorance of people like me about guns, and saying clip instead of magazine.
Yep.
Using the term assault weapon, which they say is not okay.
Yep.
Is there anything to be said about the use of language among the people who are interested in managing gun violence through gun control? Use of language in such a fashion that we're taking seriously or are able to converse with people who are responsible gun owners.
Yep. So two things to say about that. There are folks who are very adamant about unfettered access to guns, whose minds and hearts were never going to change. So I just want to say that out loud. But for folks that you want to engage in conversation with, one of the things that I did when I became the executive director of the coalition is I actually sat with someone who has expertise in all of the logistics, mechanics, and technology of guns, took guns apart, put them back together, learned all the terms, magazine versus clip, all of those things, so that I would have an understanding of that language, because it's, as I keep on saying, you can't address an issue you don't understand. So it was important for me to get that education. It's a really interesting training to go through. I've actually done it twice now. And it's something that if folks are ever interested in, the person who does it is always happy to do it for folks. So it's certainly something that I can connect you with. But I do think that being able to understand the mechanics, particularly because there's a lot of discussion now about what's being termed as an assault weapons ban, how we had it, started in 1994. President Biden was actually very involved in passing it. It lapsed in 2004. There were many loopholes. To really understand that, you actually need to understand all the technology. So I do think that that is important. I saw a hand over here as well.
Well, you mentioned that on your website there are opportunities to address our state legislators about the current bills in the House.
Yep.
And could you say a little bit, especially for the people on live stream, about how to go about that? I know there are sample letters out there that make it very easy
Yep.
to address your state senator and
Yep.
State rep.
Yep.
And I notice now that letters are to be directed to the House and Ways Committee.
Exactly. So right now, because we're at the end of our legislative session, our advocacy for the crime gun data analysis bill, which I mentioned before, is for folks to contact their reps and senators to ask their reps and senators to contact both House and Senate Ways and Means, which is where that bill is living, because we want Ways and Means to bring it to a full floor vote. So that's where that advocacy is living. We sent out an action alert yesterday that has a sample script. If you want to call, if you want to send an email, so that lives there and can give you the language to do that. Starting on June 15th, which is this week, if I'm correct in where I am in the calendar, we're doing a week of action with our friends at Citizens for Juvenile Justice about 3 juvenile justice reform bills. It actually starts with the screening of the documentary I mentioned before, a legislative advocacy training, and then an action at the State House for 3 bills. Raise the age, which would raise the age for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds to be taken out of the adult justice system, put back in the juvenile justice system. It improves outcomes for those young people. Expungement, which would remove nonviolent offenses from the record of a young person, because having a record means you can't get housing and you can't get a job and you can't get the things that you need to be safe and well in the world. And then juvenile diversion, which would keep more young people out of the criminal justice system altogether. And so we'll be sending out a whole bunch of action alerts about all of those bills too. So if you want to sign up for our newsletter or follow our social media, you will get all of that information. And we always try to provide a script so that you don't have to be the expert on the issue. We'll give you the language. The importance is that legislators are hearing from their constituents that you care about this bill, that you want to see it move forward, and this is the change it's going to make in the world. And so our website always has that information, and we try to get it out via email and social media as well.
Let's maybe do another question or two, and then we'll continue with some Shabbat.
Okay. Raise the age.
Change the age. What happens? It used to be that if someone committed an awful crime, murder, let's say, they would, if they stayed in the juvenile system, they basically would be out at 21. Are you addressing that and how to, someone doesn't get rehab from a murder in a year or two, so that group of 18 to 21, what happens to those kids?
So there's some nuances to that because it's not every charge.
Right.
So the idea is that, the adult criminal legal system provides very little services and supports, period. So the idea is that 18, 19, 20-year-olds get more services and supports through the juvenile justice system. They just do better with that. Their outcomes improve. So there's some nuances as to who's eligible for that. But the idea is to get more young people who are system involved, connected with services, and also to stay connected with their families, because the adult system doesn't really allow for that. The juvenile justice system does. And I say this all the time, Benjamin, hold your ears, as the mother of a young adult, the idea that an 18 or 19-year-old would be denied access to their families does not feel okay to me. It just doesn't. It doesn't feel like they're going to get better or do okay in the world if they don't have access to their families. So that was one of the reasons why I started to feel very passionate about this bill. But there are some nuances as to which charges that applies to. Not all.
If you do that, are you already ready with the juvenile system to accept all
Yep.
those people that are being released now and work here?
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion with DYS, which is the system that would manage that. There's capacity. Yep.
One more question from anyone who hasn't had a chance.
Can I mention just one other?
Please, yeah.
Something I forgot to mention earlier. We are having an additional screening of the movie This Ain't Normal with a panel discussion at the main branch of the Boston Public Library on June 28th. It is going to be a chance to really dig deep into these issues and to hear from folks who are doing a lot of work around reentry and welcoming folks back into communities after incarceration. So if folks are interested, that information is also on our website. It's another opportunity just to get involved and learn more about this work as well. And I'll just say thank you for having me this evening. It's been a pleasure to be with all of you. Shabbat Shalom.